Hey folks, Matt from artoftheimage.com. Ming Thein, I think I'm pronouncing his name right, but anyways, you should check him out online if you haven't seen him. MingThein.com. Great photographer and a great teacher, and he does, one of his things is ultra prints, so he likes super high resolution prints. Pretty neat. You can purchase them from his site if you want to check it out. But he'd purchased the 5DsR from Canon, the 50 megapixel DSLR, and he's got his final review up. And it's of interest to me. There's a lot of good points that he liked about the 5DsR. But there was several things here. It looks like there's about 9 reasons why he, as he puts it, he didn't get along with it. So he's, from what I understand, staying with his Nikon D810s, which is interesting. Because there has been some, indications of problems, or not problems, but the limitations of the 5DsR in comparison to other things, especially high ISO and things. Let's look at what Ming says. So the first one, dynamic range is limited compared to the D810, about 2 stops at base ISO by my estimation, and that gap increases as you go up. So that's interesting. So dynamic range, really important aspect of a camera, and he's saying, there's a guy, professional, great shooter, who shot both cameras, and he feels even at base ISO, 2 stops difference in dynamic range, and that increases as you turn it up. So that's interesting, and a point that I think a lot of people that would be a problem for. Metering in evaluative mode is unpredictable. That's the second point that he has, that he didn't get along with the camera about. And that's, if your metering's not working, that can be an issue, right? You're going to be shooting more shots and getting frustrated as you're having to take more and make adjustments. So not good to not have a camera metering predictably. Number 3, at the pixel level, I'd stop at ISO 3200 with some noise reduction afterwards. Beyond that, it isn't so much the noise, but loss of acuity and color accuracy that become an issue. So maybe that's what some people were saying when we saw the reports about it being noisy. Maybe it was more what Ming is pointing out, that it's loss of acuity and color accuracy. Files are larger, but with no more perceived detail or clarity. So really, what's the advantage of those huge 50 megapixel files if we have loss of acuity and clarity and no more perceived detail or clarity? Now, I think he's comparing that directly to the D810, but you could probably compare that even to a 24 megapixel body. You might see even more favor on the side of the smaller sensor. Then we have some button function combinations are impossible. You cannot have an AE lock on the shutter button in anything other than evaluative metering, for instance, and then spot metering point doesn't follow your AF. You have no choice but to dance a jig with your fingers over the back button. So he's just not liking the ergonomics and how those button assignments and how the actual buttons function with the AE lock. To some people, that's a big deal. For me, not so much. It's not something I use a lot, but it may be for you. Battery life is left a lot to be desired. I never saw more than 600 frames, often more like 300. This is in comparison to 1200 plus under similar circumstances with the D810. So that's a pretty significant difference in battery life. And if, like Ming, if you're out working on assignment, that could be a big problem. You have to, at the very least, carry more batteries, but then even still, you got to take the time to swap them out and whatnot. And if you're on assignment, shooting something that's time sensitive, or it's an action sequence or something, a battery failing is a problem. So that's not good. Long lockup times in live view, busy, he's got in quotes busy, so you get that busy signal, became a familiar screen. So in other words, he was experiencing that a lot in live view. So perhaps the camera's computer chip cannot keep up with that huge amount of data flow in live view. So that's a negative. That slightly larger and slightly clearer viewfinder was also quite not so snappy or easy to manual focus with, which is interesting because you probably kind of think it was the reverse, that it would be easier, but he's saying it's a negative. And then last but not least, you can't swap the front and rear dial functions either, but he does say you get used to that fairly quickly. And I guess the other interesting thing, I shouldn't say the other thing, but he says by far his biggest headache was it tended to be a fair weather friend. He says under ideal circumstances on a tripod or in very good light with critical focus obtained with the very best lenses, the files are pretty incredible. And I've seen some of those. They are pretty incredible. But if any of those stars fail to align, so if any of those things are not working for you, then you're going to end up with something slightly soft looking and just a tad disappointing, as though somebody slipped an AA filter back on, he says. So, and he's saying that somehow the jump from 36 to 50 is magnifying the visibility of a lot of those things. You might not see them in a 36 D810, 36 megapixel D810, or especially not on a 24 megapixel 750 or a 610. So this is interesting. So do any of those, are those things that would cause you, if you're looking at the 5DsR, would any of those things he's noticed, the dynamic range, the unpredictable metering, the after ISO 3200 clarity and pixel acuity not being good, like these type of things? Is this something that would cause you to not purchase the 5DsR? Are you somebody that owns a 5DsR and you're experiencing this and not happy with it? Are you considering, unloading it? Let me know. Let's have a discussion on the 5DsR and the points here, the 8 or 9 points that Ming found to be problematic for him, and I think why he's not continuing on with it. Thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned. Leave some comments below. We'll have a discussion on the 5DsR. We'll be back soon here at artoftheimage.com. Thanks.